few months ago, I made a video calling out sustainable brands and the scandals that they had found themselves in. TerraCycle has absolutely no proof or details about how things are being recycled. That is TerraCycle's scandal, essentially that their entire business model is bullshit, and I'm really excited to watch how this lawsuit progresses. I had some questions about how their business actually works, but more importantly, I had a lot of questions about their recent lawsuit. The lawsuit focused on how they were marketing and communicating their recycling system to the public and through advertising, those sort of things. Essentially, the last beach cleanup in California, which is like an advocacy group of sorts, was accusing TerraCycle of greenwashing. And if you want to know how and why and what in more detail, I'm going to link that video for you up here and in the description box as well. With all that being said, I talk shit on a lot of brands. Most of the time, brands that don't really claim to be sustainable, or if they do, it's just one of those things where they're trying to pull the wool over people's eyes and just get people who don't really understand, which is fair enough. It's a whole marketing strategy, which I personally think is fucked up, but it exists. The brands I talked about in that video and TerraCycle, which we're talking about in this video specifically, they do care because I think sustainability is at their core. So when someone on YouTube with a pretty large audience criticizes them, they want to speak up for themselves. So I found an email in my email a few weeks after that video went live from TerraCycle themselves. I mean, I can't lie, my heart stopped. I started freaking out because no brands have ever reached out to me and talked to me about the things I'm criticizing them for. I wish more did. Maybe we'd be in a better spot. But when I saw it come through, I thought for sure it was one of these situations where they're like, stop talking about us, a cease and desist, or like a threatening sort of situation. But pleasantly, to my surprise, that was not what they were saying. TerraCycle was actually inviting me to their headquarters to see their operations, behind the scenes, interview their CEO, and all those sort of things. So without thinking, I said, of course, I'll pack up my things and head to, where?
Trenton, New Jersey.
Something I feel really good about is how little I actually have to fly for this job. Like my friends who are in environmental consulting, who I went to school with and they do consulting, some of them are flying multiple times a month to site visits, conferences, all those sort of things. So I've always felt pretty good that doing this career, I fly a lot less than if I was a consultant, so my carbon footprint is less. But I still didn't think it made the most sense to fly out to Trenton, New Jersey, just to film this video. So I put it off for a little bit because inevitably I knew at some point I would have an invitation to head up northeast, and sure enough I did. I got invited to go to YouTube's first Creators for Climate Summit a few weeks ago, which was really, really cool, but it's only an hour-and-a-half train ride from the city to Trenton, New Jersey. So I went there to get the answers that so many of you asked. The questions you asked were over on Instagram, which if you're not following me over there, you're probably missing out, so see you over there. But of all the questions I got, I kind of narrowed it down to the top 3 categories that were requested so that I could really drill down on those in the interview and during my time with TerraCycle. The first question was pretty obvious and the one that was most important to me, which was how the fuck does your business actually function and why isn't there more transparency? Second questions were you found guilty in your greenwashing lawsuit? How was it settled and what are you doing going forward as a response to the criticism you received? And third was, why is it so fucking expensive? I'll break down each of those questions and give you a TLDR of each of the segments, but here is my sit-down interview with Tom Sasaki, the CEO of TerraCycle. Okay, and I don't know if you know the context of why I'm here, but I'll tell you.
Go for it.
Okay, your guys' lawsuit that happened like
Yes.
a couple years ago, whatever.
Yeah.
I basically made a video talking about lawsuits that sustainable brands have been
Yes.
in, or just like
Yes.
controversies, criticisms, whatever. At the time I couldn't find much about what the resolution of the lawsuit
Yes.
was. And they reached out to me and they were like, if you want to know the resolution, come talk to us, you know what I mean? And if you want to know what's actually happening in TerraCycle.
You mean we reached out?
Mhm.
Ah,
Yes.
perfect. Okay,
I think-
correct. Lauren?
I think Lauren.
Lauren. Okay.
Somebody.
Yeah,
Thank you, Lauren.
Excellent.
I asked my audience what questions they have for you, and then obviously I have some for myself.
Sounds good.
So I kind of want to go over the background of the lawsuit and how it was
Yes.
resolved. Like we should probably start.
So as a little background, I mean, we've been operating for 20 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're headquartered here in New Jersey and run national services for the US, but we've been operating for 20 years nationally in 20 countries. I only mention that because We've only ever been sued twice in our entire lives. One way earlier when we were a worm food company.
Eric was telling me this.
And you can Google TerraCycle Miracle Grow, sort of a fun story.
Yeah.
But so that's a really important thing. Is this really rarely happens. And so we got contacted, and they were asking us about how our brand partners are advertising their TerraCycle programs.
Right.
And in fact, what we ended up resolving on the lawsuit, we agreed in the first exchange back and forth with them to say, you know what, great point, we didn't realize it, we're happy to make this particular change, which I'll describe to you in a minute.
Yeah.
And then I think probably to drive legal fees or whatnot, they ended up going through somewhat of a legal process, and then we settled in the same year it was filed. And the settlement is that when a brand partner communicates one of their recycling programs with TerraCycle, if there is a limit that the program's going to reach, then they must say somewhere around that communication, participation may be limited, or some synonym like that.
Yeah.
Just like if you're putting out some promotion and there's a certain amount of it available, you may have to say that there's a limit to it.
Right.
Now, most of our brand partners give us budget limits. Like a brand isn't going to give a blank check. They're going to say, here's what I'm going to invest, and then our job is to make those programs as convenient, accessible, as big as possible. That's our mission, within that constraint.
Okay.
And in many cases, programs never get to a limit. In some cases, rare cases, brands give no budget limits. Mm-hmm. But when there is a limit and that's reached, that's when they would have to communicate.
Okay. Do you have any insight on how these brands, because you work with some of the world's biggest brands, how they decide these budgets? Because their pollution, like in terms of plastic, is infinite, right? So do you have any insight on how that budget is?
Well, I think it's a good question. I would say brands don't legally have to take responsibility over their waste, which is a huge issue, right?
The root of the issue, of course.
It is the root of the issue, right? Is that any manufacturer should be liable for the damage their product produces. Not just garbage, mind you. Climate change, deforestation, all these things. We live in this is the standard world, right? If we go and make paper, we don't have to replace the trees. If we, all these negatives, right? And so we first go out to brands and say, hey, we can help you if you want, take voluntary responsibility over this externality, right? Which is a new sort of cost. It's not like they were ever budgeting for this before. Usually they would give us some amount of money, to say, let's run a pilot, let's launch a program, see if consumers are even interested in taking part in recycling. And then what tends to happen is if people are interested and folks are, telling them on their social media and everywhere, like, we love this, can you please invest here? They will typically invest more and more if their budgets allow. And so we have some programs that can get very big. We collect 30% of all the Nespresso capsules produced in Canada. We collect 20% of all the Lancome packaging produced in China, and a number of examples. But here brands have the budget and they're hearing from consumers, this is very important to them.
Okay, here's your TLDR. The lawsuit was settled. And under the terms of agreement, TerraCycle agreed that they could be doing much better when it comes to labeling with their business. TerraCycle agreed to maintain in written form in its records, information, and documentation supporting the validity of recyclable representations made on its website and on the label of each product. As Tom explained, the recycling systems that they have are funded by the corporations creating that waste. So the corporations pay for the recycling programs to TerraCycle, and once the funding that they've given to the recycling program runs out, those materials that have the TerraCycle logo on them are technically no longer recyclable through TerraCycle until that brand funds more of the recycling program. And in layman's terms, what that means is that TerraCycle has agreed to make that very obvious in their branding, in their logos, on their website, so that customers understand what's going on. To be honest, I think I vaguely understood that before going into this interview, but I can see how the average person would look at TerraCycle's website and go, what the hell does any of this mean, and how does it actually work? And with the lawsuit wrapped up, that's definitely my next question is, how the hell does all of this work? And can you be more transparent with us and break down how this actually works? Let's ask Tom. Can you describe, because we're going to go to your processor later, so I think a lot of these questions will be answered as well, but the process from when a consumer returns something through TerraCycle, what then happens to it?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing we do is we have a team of scientists and designers here who think about, can we somehow transform that waste into something else? And we figure out what is the technical solution to be able to recycle that object. And traditionally, stepping back, what makes something recyclable or not recyclable is not the ability to recycle it. In fact, almost everything can be somehow recycled. It's an aluminum can. It's very recyclable in our blue bins because it's profitable for garbage companies to bother recycling it. And what makes a mascara wand not recyclable is not that it can't be, it just costs more to collect and process. So garbage companies choose not to recycle it because your recycling company is not legally obligated to recycle what you put in your blue bin. They're just telling you what they would like.
Yeah.
And then they'll sort out your garbage to take what they really want. Economic.
Yeah,
right.
for sure.
So now that we say have funding for a program, we set up a program to recycle that object. From there, it comes into one of our 35 check-in facilities. So these are facilities where the waste comes in. We scan that particular package, and that could be as big as a truckload, or it could be like a little envelope.
Yeah.
We weigh it so we know what's inside, and we open it up to make sure visually it's the right thing. There is some cases people just send us like the wrong box, right? Like you return the wrong thing on an e-com site.
Yeah.
Then from there, and this is I think the facility you're going to see, we take that shipment and then we separate it into lots and lots of different categories.
Yeah.
Because we may ask consumers to collect cosmetics, but inside cosmetics there's a lot of range. And so we're separating it and maybe double or triple separating it so that we can get it down into processable fractions, if you will.
Yeah.
From there, we build up enough volume so that we can run a processing run. And then we send it to one of our processing partners who will, if I simplify it, would do something like collect it, shred it, clean off all the residual content.
Yeah.
So if it's food, it's like oils and greases. If it's cosmetics, it would be like residual cosmetics or toothpaste or whatever.
Yeah.
Then do mechanical separation, so not human being separating, but equipment separating. You know, getting like with magnets pulling out the metals, or sink float allows for different types of plastics. Some plastics sink to some type float. And then once we've processed it into the most separated we possibly can, and it's clean, then we pelletize it into like a plastic raw material, or if it's an alloy, into an alloy raw material or a fiber raw material. Yeah. We may add other additives to it to get it into a state that a manufacturer actually wants to buy. Yeah. The simplest additive would be like color. But the more interesting additives are ones that may help the plastic flow faster or have bigger bendability, right? Because we need to make sure someone that actually wants this stuff at the end.
You're not recycling if no one wants it.
Exactly right. And let's say you send us a zero waste box, or you send in some waste through one of our free recycling programs. Yeah. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open it and manually sort for what is called non-compliant waste. So if you're collecting, let's say, toys, and you put in something that isn't a toy, so it's just not the right stuff. And mistakes happen. Our purity rates are up at around 98%, but that means 2% wasn't what's supposed to go to. Yeah. Now, when we sort that, we will try to find a program for it, even though it wasn't the right thing. So we'll still try to find a home, but sometimes we don't have one. Yeah. Right?
Well, that is not on your guys' anyway.
Fair, absolutely. But it is an example of what we sort out, and that would go to some form of disposal. And their incineration is better than landfilling, so we'll prefer incineration for that type of stuff. Okay. It's like the unknown, the random thing that was by mistake put in the box.
Okay. Right. So I think that is like where people want to understand like more transparency. So from my end, the TerraCycle, your involvement is the 35 facilities. Yeah. You guys own those facilities, or they're like partnerships?
No, certainly. So if we take the different, you got check-in is one facility type. Okay. You have then sorting partners, and then you have processing partners. Okay. So so let's go to the beginning and then logistics, right? So logistics are all third parties, like a FedEx, a UPS, or trucking companies. Right. Those pick up the waste from, say, a retailer or your home and take it to one of our 35 check-in facilities. Okay. In those 35 check-in facilities, I think we operate 2 and we own 1. Okay. The vast majority are third-party contractors. Right. Then from there, the separation facilities are third parties. So you're going to see today is one of our partners. Okay. And then from there, the processors are third parties as well. Yeah. And the reason that it's all third parties, right, versus doing it ourselves is, we're still a small company, right? We're under 100 million in revenue, so it's hard to necessarily own large facilities. We also take a very wide range of materials. And so we need a lot of different capabilities.
I can understand the amount of money to run that many facilities would be.
Yeah. It is. And also like the capabilities we need, like how we collect and deal with diapers. Whole different process than cigarette butts, whole different process than coffee capsules. Okay. Now, we many times come up with the technology, but then we find sort of like a subcontractor, like a vendor who will take our technology, deploy it, and then run it for us when we need that process.
Okay, I think it makes a lot of sense because also erecting an entire processing facility doesn't make sense if there are processing facilities that exist as well.
That's right, and so what we like, there's a lot of good processing out there. They just may not have this one machine that like you need to like say separate the paper off the filter off a cigarette butt. Okay. So our scientists will invent that and then go to this process and say, you have everything you need, but we need you to put this one little, whatever in that allows now cigarette recycling to function. Okay. And then off they go, and then they run, and we can then replicate that around the world as we need that capability up in, say, France or in Australia or wherever. Okay.
I think that's a really interesting thing to dig into too, because I think like logically people don't understand that these processes may not exist. Or would you say TerraCycle helped create a lot of the processes to recycle these materials?
100%. TerraCycle, without us, things like, I mean, hundreds of different waste streams will not have recycling solutions on them today.
Okay.
And I think the important part is the solution isn't like a mousetrap. It's not like I invented a piece of equipment. We have to come up with first, how do we collect it in a way that is safe and accessible?
Yeah.
Right, because if I have, like, take a program like razor blade recycling. We now run that for a number of companies, from like Bic all the way to Gillette, in 8 countries or something. The first is, how do you actually get people comfortable to like collect razor blades, right?
Yeah.
Which are a hygiene product, you know, who knows what's on them, blah, blah, blah. Do that in a way that's safe, but actually people will do it. That's a whole thing. We need to, yes, physically process it and get those razor blades into a recycled state. That's what we just like went through and described.
Right.
But then you also need to run a business model on it so that someone, like in this example, Gillette or Bic, are willing to fund it.
Okay.
And they're, you know, you have to make sure that they're excited year over year to fund it, and ideally year over year to increase their funding.
The TLDR here is, it's complicated. One thing I always wanted to know is, why isn't there like an infographic explaining, you know, we ship in the thing, it goes to a warehouse, it goes to a processor, it's turned into another product, and these are some of the products that it's turned into, and these are where our processors are, and why isn't there a video inside the processor showing the waste going from waste to a recyclable like output? And I think Tom got into this a little bit with the on-camera interview, but really where I started to understand why this part of it is not more transparent comes down to capitalism, baby. Doesn't it always? Essentially, as I say all the time, recycling is not a charity, it's a business. And for a business to function, it has to be profitable. And unfortunately, even though recycling is a positive, net positive, for the world at large, the people who do it are still in it to make money. So what that basically means is all of these different processors that Tom explained that they work with, 30 across the US or whatever it was, they have secrets. They have technologies and ways that they break down the materials and turn them into a valuable output that they don't want other people knowing about. And TerraCycle itself is a private business as well. It doesn't have public funding, which I personally think that the solution to a lot of the issues surrounding sustainability and the environment, if they were publicly funded, that's how they get solved, because it is a community-wide, a human-wide problem. It's really not a problem that should be left up to businesses at this point, but TerraCycle is a private business. The processors they partner with are private businesses, and whoever buys the recyclable material after it's processed is also a private business. Hence the reason that TerraCycle can't be more transparent, specifically with their processors. And I can say that I've realized this happens from like my personal perspective, because you guys ask me a lot if I could go behind the scenes at a recycling facility so that we could understand what the hell is going on. And I can tell you from experience of asking dozens of them at this point, they don't want to let me in for 2 reasons. Number one, safety, because there's a lot of stuff going on around there, things flying around that could gouge your eyes, or you could step on something and just, it's dangerous. But reason number 2 is they don't want other people seeing in there and really seeing what they're doing and how they do it, because every other recycling processor that they're competing with could steal that information. Now, with that being said, even though most processors won't let me in behind the scenes with the camera, TerraCycle's processor agreed to it. So let's see a little bit of behind the scenes at their processor.
Thank you.
Since I've been to recycling facilities before in school, we were able to go to different landfills, recycling facilities, all those sort of things when I was in school. I really didn't learn anything new from going to TerraCycle's processor, except for the fact that this sorting process is so much more meticulous because it is all these different types of materials. As I was talking to Jacob about, one of the people who are walking me through the facility, materials recovery facilities, or MRFs as they're typically said, are like giant machines that can sort through typical waste streams. TerraCycle is recycling things that those sort of MRF machines cannot sort. So it does take human hands to be able to do this. So when I saw that, and I saw that there are people involved in this and it's not just a machine, obviously one of my questions is, how are these people paid and treated, and what hours do they work, and all those sort of things. You can always try to take these businesses at their word for it, or their employees on the clock, what they'll say and what they won't is a little iffy. But personally, just from while I was there, something I can tell you is we got there during their break, and they didn't want to have them come off of break to do the video while we were there, so we sat in a little room until they were ready to start back up. So I know they're not working like long hours without breaks, but that's as much as I can say to that sort of aspect of the business. We got to open up some of the boxes, which they have such a wide variety of boxes. And I think I knew that, but the last time I looked at their website, I think there were like 30. And I think at this point they have over 100. So that was wild to me. And after seeing all this and realizing that actual people have to be paid to do this sort of stuff, it started to make a lot of sense to me why these zero waste boxes are so expensive. But I did get Tom's answer on that. So let's see why Tom explains these zero waste boxes are so fucking expensive.
Zero waste boxes are certainly expensive.
Yeah.
Right?
That was one of the most common things.
100%. I completely agree. But it's what it costs us to run it. So my point of view was, look, you know what? Let's at least make it available. Yeah. And for those who have the means and are interested in doing it, at least it's a service when there wasn't one before. Right. As an example, by your feet, I just show this to you if it's all right. This is a new division that we're launching. These are called zero waste bags. This is an example where this is 10 times cheaper than a zero waste box, if not more. One. Yeah, so this is a zero waste box.
I'll hold it for you.
Oh, sure. So that's a small zero waste box, you know, and this one you can buy. So we have to send this box to you. Yeah. You fill it up with waste. Then you have to send it back through like a UPS, and we take it separated through the whole thing. Yeah. This is zero waste bags, which are quite literally, they just started launching here in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, and we're rolling them out. This one is 10 times cheaper. Okay. You pick which waste stream you want. We pick waste streams that are all like similar for us in processing cost. Yeah. You fill it up with that waste stream and you put it on your curb. Yeah. It gets picked up from your door. Okay. So I like this. Right? 10 times cheaper. Okay. Who doesn't love that? And even more convenient. Yeah. Because you don't have to get a big box. You get a little bag. You put this in your, your drawer, and it gets picked up directly from your doorstep. Okay. But this took us a long time to figure out the supply chain and to innovate on it. And we had to start with zero waste boxes to get here. Yeah. And you know what? If this goes national and does well, zero waste boxes will go away, and this will become the new standard. Okay. And then the question will be what's next, and then what's next, and what's next. Okay, so when you say 10 times cheaper, you're meaning from the shipping perspective, right? All in. All of it. All in. I really like that you just explained that the cost is because that's what it costs for you guys to process it, and that you are only providing that as an option to consumers. Yeah. It's not to put pressure on consumers. I want my audience to understand that before we move on. Yeah. And the other part of that is, from my perspective, is that these boxes were meant to be bought by boutiques, schools, things like that. Yeah, usually that's a very fair point. Like most of the zero waste box was designed as a concept towards a business of some kind. I talk to consumers mostly, like that's who I'm talking to. Yeah. And so I'm realizing that the zero waste boxes or the like label on the back of their chapstick is how they interact with TerraCycle the most. Yes. And so they feel like it's a lot of responsibility on consumers. I don't think that comes from your end. No. Like, look, our job, to be clear, is here's a part of responsibility. Everyone should do everything they can. So if we work at a company or we can influence companies, let's do that. If we're a lawmaker, let's pass laws. We're all consumers though, and we also should try there. When we construct programs, we want to try to make it as absolutely easy for citizens to use them as possible, because we only get paid if it actually comes in and gets recycled. Right? So everything we do is to try to keep it as simple, as cheap, and as simple. So it's convenient, both economically and in the amount of effort you put in. So that's why we go out there and hunt for free programs and try to get sponsorship, because that allows it to be free to folks out there. Yeah. When we run those, we try to make them as easy to see, as easy to access, easy to use as absolutely possible. But we're not, like we go to certain companies who say, you know what, I'm not responsible and I'm not going to be. I don't have to, right? Okay, it's a free market. There's no law saying you must. Totally fine. Right now. Today, but I mean, let's hope there will be, right? If we cannot get a funder, let's at least make it available for whatever it costs to run it. Okay. And at least there's the option exists. So, and one of the questions that I got from my audience is like, when will TerraCycle help shift the responsibility from consumers onto corporations? I feel that is what TerraCycle exists to do. Yeah, if you think about it this way, look, I think first and foremost, if you're a company and you're a manufacturer, there's so many environmental issues, you're gonna have to pick. You're not going to be able to say, I'm going to solve everything, right, that I'm able to do. So they're going to think about, if you're running a company, which one do my consumers care about the most? Yeah. And so it's very important that there's some level of consumer interest, pressure, and so on, because that's where companies will put their dollars, right? Then when those dollars are deployed, it's important to A, celebrate that the companies are doing it, and B, continue to pressure to keep doing it. Yeah. Now on our end, we are a way for a company, because many companies have said to us, we want solutions for years, we don't, and we are getting the pressure, but we have no answer. We are an example service provider who can then say, well, we can launch a solution. And each step of the way, from recycling to recycled content to reuse, it's almost like an order of magnitude bigger amount of like human time, capital for the company to achieve that. Because in like the first version, we're like, we'll recycle the way it is. Next one, it's like, let's keep it the way it is, but change what it's made from. The third one is let's redesign the entire thing. And you're talking new production lines, new everything, right?
And behavioral change is a huge part of that.
Yes, it is, absolutely. And so that's the type of, sort of process we take companies on if they're interested.
So here's the TLDR. TerraCycle exists as a solution for companies. It was founded that way, it's still operating that way, and I think that's the way it should be. I think it's really unfortunate that these things aren't publicly funded, and I think at some point within the next 5 to 10 years, we will come to a point in society where it absolutely has to be. We're quite literally running out of landfill space, which I could make a whole video on if you're interested. But I hope that answers a lot of the questions about why it's so expensive, and that TerraCycle doesn't put that out there to put pressure onto consumers, just to offer it as a solution to those who want one. And the other thing Tom said that I thought was really interesting about all of this is that at this point, TerraCycle existing and these brands working with them is all out of the goodness of their heart and or because customers are asking for it. At this point, these brands that TerraCycle works with literally do not have to do anything. The brands that lie got a lot of criticism from people to TerraCycle in my Instagram question, which was like, why do they work with some of the world's most destructive brands? Which I hear you, those brands are also the most purchased brands, okay? They are creating the most waste. And so if there is a brand that I think TerraCycle should partner with, it's those brands. That makes sense to me. But the interesting part about this is, and giving criticism to TerraCycle for doing that, more so than the fact that it's probably the most impactful way to reduce waste, is also the fact that if TerraCycle didn't exist, these brands wouldn't do anything because no one will make them. We don't have any sort of regulations from our government to do so. So I think TerraCycle exists as a solution that's pretty important. If I'm being completely honest, I actually had every intention of going to see TerraCycle and coming out of it like, there's no way they're doing what they say they're doing. They're partnering with these giant brands. They're putting these zero waste boxes out there to consumers that are ridiculously expensive, and it's all just like a scam, essentially. That's what I plan to make this video and say. But after actually hearing the way that TerraCycle was founded, their journey, what they're doing, why they offer this, it all makes complete sense to me under the umbrella of capitalism. We live in the society that we do, in the economy and the economic system that we do, and I think as those things exist, TerraCycle is doing way more good than they are harm. Now, do I think that means that all the brands that TerraCycle partners with are automatically eco-friendly now because they recycle their packaging? Absolutely not. Most of the brands that they partner with, I personally would never buy from, and I would never recommend you do either. But most people in the world do buy those brands, and TerraCycle just exists as a solution to that thing. And after the whole discussion with Tom, I don't think TerraCycle is greenwashing, but I would love to hear what you think, because this is not just about my opinion. I am a sustainability expert. I went to school for this. I've been in this field for a while. I know when to detect bullshit, but I really do think that they are existing as a solution, like I said, to a problem that no one else is addressing, and honestly, these brands don't have to address at all. So TerraCycle existing is just kind of a plus overall. But I'd love to hear what you think. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, until next time, you cannot do all the good. You know what? Actually, let's do this one because we're talking about capitalism and the problems that exist within it, so we're gonna do the different outro, which is do your best and advocate for the rest. Also, this is my new filming setup for this moment. It's definitely not perfect because the window is here and the background I want is here, but this is amazing. Tell me this is not incredible. This is my new house. I don't know where, all these plants are not even destined to stay here. I just haven't had a chance to hang up all the hooks yet. So let me know what you think. If the audio is awful, this is I literally put my mic in this pocket on my passport because I didn't know how else to do it, but hopefully it wasn't too echoey for you. Hopefully this isn't too loud for you. Okay. Thank you so much. I hope you liked this video. Let me know what brands you want to see me try to go behind the scenes of next. Okay, bye.